All right, just so you know, I'm flipping around the order that I'm going to do things. I was going to go over entity framework and link today. We're going to do that tomorrow. I've got some of my notes. I got it partially complete, but not totally. Yeah, that's when you're done, you put everything. All right. So I've got part of my notes done and not all of them. So I was going to do this tomorrow, but I'm going to do it today instead. I think we can go over both Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 today. So if you have your sports store project, please bring that up. And hopefully you remember that the last time that we did anything with it, it pretty much looked like this, and that we can now put things into our shopping cart. All right, it's pretty much where we left off. We also have pagination on here, but just to show you some of the stuff that we're going to add today or what we'll be talking about today. Right now, you know, when you go and add it to your cart, you get this summary page, and that's all fine. But if you're in the middle of shopping, and let's just assume for a second that you have a certain amount of money that you want to spend, maybe $100, all right? And, you know, right now, if you're over here, you don't have any idea how much money you have spent, how many items you've bought, etc. So we're going to put a little summary thing up here that will tell you the number of items that you bought, and it will also tell you how much you paid for them so far. In addition, we're going to add a thing on here because once you put it in your cart, maybe you want to remove it from your cart. And as of right now, if you look up on the screen, there's no way to really remove anything. All right, so that's not great. All right, and that's pretty much what we'll cover in Chapter 9. Then in Chapter 10, the author talks mobile. And although this particular thing is partly mobile right now, in other words, it's partly responsive, what you'll notice is if we take a look at it here, and I start to collapse this down, that doesn't look very good. All right. So it's, like I said, it's partially mobile, but I mean, you'll notice here, and he'll talk about different ways that you can fix it. And one thing to realize as we get into Chapter 10, which again we'll get to in about an hour, whatever, is that ASP.NET Model View Controller, when you actually use Model View Controller, it is what's known as a server-side framework. It's designed to be used with a server. On the other hand, when you're talking about mobile like this, it's client-side. So you are able to do things to make your site look nicer, but they're not naturally baked in, so to speak, into MVC. All right. So with that said, Chapter 9, page 227, completing the cart. And the author says in the last chapter, he implemented a shopping cart. Now he's going to improve on it and basically complete the functionality. And he even says when he gets done, you know, it's like this particular sports store isn't going to replace Amazon or Dick's Sporting Goods or anything else. But it does do a pretty good job of actually creating an ASP.NET MVC project. Did you talk to him? Okay. All right. So the first thing they talk about in here, down towards the bottom of this first page, is model binding. All right? And it's not the easiest concept in the world to understand. But I'll try to explain it to you as best I can, but one thing you have to realize is the way that this software was designed. It was designed so that the different pieces of software can work with one another. All right? In other words, Model View Controller is a smart, or at least fairly smart architecture. And ASP.NET is a fairly smart architecture. All right? So it says here the MVC framework uses a system called model binding to create C-sharp objects from HTTP requests in order to pass them as parameter values to action methods. Oh, that's real clear. All right. What they're basically saying is the different parts of your program are able to, quote, talk to one another, unquote. So in other words, if you create something in the model, if it's going to be used in the controller will naturally be able to know what kind of data it is. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, when you think about the models that we did on the test, for example, we said something was an int or a decimal or whatever, all right? And what we're saying now is when that stuff gets passed around, directly or indirectly, the other parts of the architecture understand the type of data that it is. And you might think, well, big deal, an int's an int. But it understands it even if it's a complex data type. So in other words, even if it's a list of products, it understands. All right? Did you notice that when we were working with the model on the test and you would type in model dot, the IntelliSense would kick in and it would show you like model dot, I don't know, a price per shirt or something like that. All right? That's kind of what they're getting into in here. So the first thing they want us to do, starting on the bottom of page 227 here, is to create a custom model binder. Again, hopefully by now what you've realized is this author, that anytime he can go and, if you've got a fairly complex subject that you're talking about, he breaks it up into tons of folders. And if he's not sure where something belongs, he creates a new folder and he puts it in there. All right? It's kind of like, again, if you imagine that we were writing an outline, if we were going to give a speech, and rather than kind of grouping stuff together, anything that didn't seem like it fit with something else, it got its brand new Roman numeral or whatever. All right? So it says we want to create a custom model binder by implementing system.web.iModelBinder. Again, it's an interface. I'm starting to use some terms with you that you're going to hear not just this semester, but also next semester. An interface is not a class. Whereas you inherit from a class, you implement an interface. What an interface typically has is a bunch of method names in it. And if you implement the interface, what you agree to do is you agree to use those methods, all right? And you agree to use them in the way that they're set up. In other words, if they take certain parameters, you have to have them take those parameters. If they return a certain something, you have to have them return a certain something. All right? And that may make little sense to you right now. But next semester, when we're writing Java programs, you're going to be forced into using interfaces. Also, when you create a new class, what do? You use the new operator. All right? So if I create a person class, and I want to say person Luke equal new person, you don't do that with an interface. Interfaces can't be implemented. Interfaces can't be instantiated. You can't create them. They're add-ons, for lack of better words. And then, so a natural question would be, fine, they're add-ons. What the hell do you want them for? Why don't you just use a class? Because you can inherit from only one class. But you can implement as many interfaces into a program as you need to. All right. So the author says we're going to add a new folder in our Sports Store Web UI under infrastructure called binders. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to come back into here. I've got my Sports Store Web UI. I've got a lot of stuff open, so I'm going to close a few things here. All right. And underneath here, I've got an infrastructure folder. The only thing currently in my Sports Store .web UI infrastructure folder is a C# file called ninject dependency resolver.cs. Can everybody find that in their project? All right. So what we want to do is we want to add a new folder under infrastructure that's called binders. It's the first thing we're going to do. So right mouse click on your infrastructure folder, add, new folder, and call it binders. All right. So now under infrastructure, under the infrastructure folder, we have both our file, our ninject dependency resolver.cs, and we have a folder, and in that folder is called binders. All right. So what we want to do is we want to create something called cart model binder inside of there. It's going to be a class. So in other words, we want to come in here and we want to right mouse click on binders, choose add, and go to class. Right mouse click on the new binders folder you just created, choose add, and choose class. Name the class cart model binder.cs. The code for this is shown on the bottom of 227 and the top half of 228. So there I've added it. All right, I'm going to come back in here and grab this from the bottom of 227. It'll give me an error because it's incomplete as of right now. All right. And then go to the top of the next page and grab all of this. So in other words, create that new class file and copy the code from both the bottom of page 227 and the top of page 228 and put it in there. All right. Now that I've got it all in, as far as I can tell at least, it's not giving me any errors. All right. And you can look at the code on your own screen if you want to, but let's take a look at what the author says about this. He says there's one method in here called bind model. All right. It says the two parameters are provided for creating a domain and making that domain object possible. The bottom line is this. We're creating a new object, but as of right now, it doesn't talk to anything. All right. So the next thing we want to have it do is we want to have it available to our program. All right. So it says here, we need to tell the MVC framework that it can use this model binding class to create instances of cart. Why are we doing that? We've already got an instance of a cart. By doing it this way, what the author is going to do is he's going to be able to take and streamline his code by removing some of the current code that's in there. All right. So we want to go into our global asax.cs file. Does anybody remember what this file is? This is the file that runs at the beginning of the program. Application start. So upon startup, it registers any areas you have, it configures your routes, and we're going to add to it this model binder so that it is now going to be available to us. So inside of your app start folder, find your, I'm sorry, it's not in there, it's by itself down near the bottom. Find the global ASAX file. It's way down towards the bottom here. Mine's the third from the end. And we want to open up underneath that the global asax.cs file. Now I'm going to show you something, and if I was in this class and I listened to what I'm about to say, I'd say, who cares? But it's kind of important if you look up on the screen here. Back in the olden days, like 5-10 years ago, Most of these applications that were created were not MVC applications. They were web form applications. The reason I'm telling you that is when you worked with web forms, you didn't have models and views and controllers. You had files that looked like this, but they were called like global.aspx. And every ASPX file would have underneath it an ASPX.cs file that was called a code behind file. And the reason that I'm telling you that is it's not implausible that if you would ever go and get a job as an ASP.NET programmer, somebody could say to you, Chris, I want you to go and maintain this program. And what is it? It's an ASP.NET web form program. And if he turns around and says, I can't do that, I never learned web forms. Either they're going to say, you better learn it or you better get the hell out of here. All right? So we brought that, we're bringing this global.asax file up, and we are supposed to add these two using statements here, sportstore.domain.entities and sportstore.ui.infrastructure.binders. Whoops. All right, and then once we do that, go down to the very bottom, and right after the call to route config.register routes, right underneath that, we want to add the line that's shown at the very top of page 229. Again, that is going to make this model binder information available to our program at program startup. And as I mentioned, it's going to be a way that we're going to be able to work with carts in an easier way than what we're doing right now. All right, maybe that isn't put well, but that's the best way that I can think about it or explain it to you right now. All right. So the author says, I can now update the cart controller to remove the getCart method and rely on the model binder to provide me with cart objects. All right. So in other words, we can go in here and make these changes. The changes that are shown in the book on page 229. All right. Everything that's there that's in bold, for lack of better words, is typically replacing something that had been there. All right. So all these get carts are going to be gone. They're going to be replaced with what you see here. All right. So I'm going to go into my cartcontroller.cs file. So under controllers, into the cart controller. And I mean, let's face it, there's two ways you can do this. We can look at what's up here. All right. We can start making the changes manually. So you'll notice, for example, in here, what are we doing? We're adding in here cart. All right. And now we've got that return view, etc. But now we have here, comma, cart equal cart. All right. Now we still have here, I'm not sure why I'm getting that. We'll fix it in a minute. But the point is, we still have here, all right, much of the code that we had previously. Not all of it, but much of it. All right. And I don't know if it's going to, it looks like I'm going to need another paren here. No, that isn't it. So I'm going to take that code that's in there right now, and I'm going to replace it with the new code that they show right here. All right. Now, I'm not worried about it. I mean, when you look at wow, you got all these errors now. I'm hoping they're going to fix themselves as I put the rest of the code in here. All right. First thing to do is look up at the top. Am I missing any using statements? System link, web MVC, domain abstract, domain entities, Web UI models. That looks good. All right. So now I'm going to go down after this to my redirect to route result. And again, replace this, everything that you see in there, with the new stuff, so to speak, that we now have here. All right. Next, we've got our redirect route result remove from cart. So the previous one was the add to cart. This is the remove from cart. I'm not, again, I'm not the author, so I can't say what I'm about to tell you with total certainty, but what the author appears to be doing is he's trying to show you a way of doing something that isn't the best way, but might be the easiest way for you to understand. Then he goes back afterwards and he replaces that way with what he considers to be a better way. Now, could there still be errors? Well, it looks like there are still errors. All right. It says not all paths return a value. Okay. There's a return. Return this, card equal card, etc. And I'm looking in my index. What does that mean? Does that mean I could have made a mistake? It means I probably did make a mistake. All right. I think I've got this in there twice. I think that's the problem. All right. So let's take a look at what the author says here after he puts all that stuff in. All right, I don't want to read to you. So let's try to summarize what's in there. We've removed the get cart method. We added a cart parameter. All right. That cart parameter now exists in every one of the action methods that we have. So what we just added to each one of those action methods, amongst other things, was that cart parameter. That cart parameter was what we put in that model binder. All right. It says, for example, when the MVC framework receives a request for the add to cart method, it begins by looking at the parameters for the action method. It looks to the list of binders available and it says, is there something I can use? If it finds it, it uses it. All right. So why would you do that? He gives you 3 benefits up here near the top of page 230. 3 reasons that you might want to do this. The first is that whole separation of concerns, because what he's done is he has separated the logic, bless you, used to create the cart from that of the controller. So he pulled that out. All right, so that's the first thing. Second thing it says, any controller class that works with cart objects can declare them as action method parameters, so they can take advantage of this custom binding. Finally, and the one he thinks is the most important, is now you can unit test the cart controller without needing to mock a lot of basically cart objects. All right. So you will be at least attempting on page 230, 231, and the top of 232, you will be attempting these unit tests. All right. And again, you say, well, I've been trying these unit tests. They sort of work or sometimes work. Just do the best you can. I have been at job interviews already when I have been asked, all right, what is your experience with unit testing? What I don't want you to say is, I have no clue as to what you're talking about. All right? I mean, you can say, I took an ASP.NET class. We went through a project that was in the book. In the project that was in the book, all right, we kind of stepped through it, and they had us do unit tests in there. So I'm familiar with the concept. All right? Is that true, Christian? Well, tell me about it. All right? And I'm not saying you're going to remember all of it, but you could at least probably talk your way through it. All right, that moves us up to page 232, completing the cart. Again, please look up on the screen here. I'm going to move up a little bit. This is what we want. We want to add those buttons to the right of whatever we've added to the cart that will allow us to remove what we put in the cart. Now think about when we do that too, what has to happen? All right. Well, eventually what we're going to show up on the top is how many objects are in our cart. So we'll have to decrement that number of objects. But even more important, if I've got two things in my shopping cart, if I bought product A for $10 and product B for $20, my shopping cart now says I owe $30. If I grab object B and take it out of there, it should decrement what I owe from 30 down to 10. So that's what we want to have happen in here. All right? So the author says it's now time to complete the cart functionality by adding two features. The first will be the remove an item from the cart. The second will be the summary that, again, we're going to put up here in the top right corner of our page. All right? So the author says we've already defined and tested a remove from cart method. All right? But now we have to expose that in a view. All right? It says we are going to do that by adding a remove button in each row of the cart summary. So the changes to views cart index. So what does that mean? We want to go into our views. Inside of our views, I'm going to close a few things here. Whoops. Inside of our views and inside of cart, we're going to open up our index, our cart index method that's right here. All right? And what do we want to do? Well, notice right near the top, right underneath our title, we want to add some styling. All right? And what is that doing? Vertically aligned in the middle. It's going to try to take the button and align it so that it looks decent on the screen. So I'm just going to grab these lines plus that H2 and then come down into here, find that H2, which is right there, and replace it. All right? Now, again, it's giving me an error. I'm not sure why. I'll take a look in just a second. But you can see by looking in here, the first thing you can see is we've got some inline CSS. All right? That two table tags. Thank you. All right. And looks like this got a little out of whack, so I can highlight it all, Shift Tab, and move it back. If I find that's wrong, I can always go back and rechange it too. All right. Now, going down a little bit in here, and in particular going down into the for each statement that you see in here, if we look right here, what are we doing? Well, looks like we're adding a big thing in here. That's going to be the button, so we are creating another form. Remove from cart, all right? So in our cart method, when our remove from cart method is called, we're going to tell it to basically go through there and literally remove that item or those items. All right, so I'm going to grab this and put it right before the end of the body, right by the last TR tag. So right there. Okay. Again, just did right what they did in the book, right before the last TR tag. So the author says we added a new column to each row of the table that contains a form with an input element. All right, we styled the element using Bootstrap, so it looked halfway decent. All right. The other thing to notice in here, if you take a look, I may have talked about this, I may not have. I don't know. But if you look right here, you'll notice we've got a couple things on screen in blue that are hidden. All right. Typically, if you take fields and you make them hidden, they're needed as part of your calculations, but there's absolutely no reason to show that to the customer. I've given you examples like this before, like the one I'm about to give you. Let's assume I go out to pizzahut.com and I want to order a pizza for dinner. So I order a pizza. I put it, maybe a bunch of stuff. I put it all in my cart. All right? And once I do, or as I'm putting it in there, not only is it showing me the things that are in my cart, but it's showing me the tax that I owe. Would you agree with that? But it's not showing me how it calculated the tax. There very well could be a field in there called tax rate, but it's a hidden field because there's really no reason. It's used in the calculation, but there's no reason for me to show it on screen. All right, it might just, for lack of better words, might make things confusing. All right. And that's when the author talks in here, down towards the bottom of page 233, about using the hidden helper methods. All right. So it says you can see the remove buttons at work by running the application. So that's a good thing to do, but it's probably high time to do a file save all and then run this. All right, let's add a kayak. There it is. Let's add a stadium. Now that's too expensive, so let's remove the stadium. And you can see it at work then. All right. The other thing that we have to add in here is we want that summary to go right in here. So right now we'd want it to say something like one item, and then for the total we'd want it to say $275. All right. So that's what they start here on page 234. So the author says we may have a functioning cart, but there is an issue in that anytime, and I mentioned this to you before, anytime you want to see how many items you have, you've got to go to that summary page. Anytime you want to see what your total bill is right now, you've got to go to that summary page. So as the author mentions here in this second paragraph on 234, to solve this problem, we're going to add a widget that summarizes the contents of the cart and that can be clicked to display the cart contents. All right. It says I will do this in much the same way that we added the navigation widget. All right. To start with, it says we need to add a simple method to our cart controller. And that's right here. This is going to be that summary thing. All right. Notice right away it's also going to return a partial view. After the other day, you should understand what a partial view is. View files can get fairly long fairly quickly. All right, so often what you'll do is you'll take some, most, or almost all of the logic and put it in one or more partial views. All right, really one partial view, and then you'll include that partial view in your program. All right, so again, in my cart controller, I want to add what's shown here on the top of page 235. And we want that to go at the very end of our cart controller class. So we added this again. Notice what this returns. All right, we're used to returning what? Action results. Here's a redirect. But now we're returning a partial view. All right. So it says this simple method needs to render a view, supplying the current cart, which will be obtained using the model binder as view data. To create the view, we'll right mouse click on there, and then we will add the code that you see here on the middle of page 235. And that should actually make some sense to you, since we're adding a method to the controller. If we want that method to be called and we want it to do something when it is called, we'll have to add an associated view. All right, so that new method right here, I'm going to right mouse click on the word summary, choose add view. All right, I think they tell us to just set it up the way it is. They don't tell you to use any model class or anything. So I'm just going to add that. And put in that. Again, that's the code. A couple divs that you can see in here. And the good news, hopefully at least, is looking at this stuff in here, that new at class equal button default, etc. All right. We've done things similar to this. We have not done these exact things, but we have done things similar to this before. All right. My hope is by Thursday, we're going to be writing fairly complex link queries and lambda expressions. And you're going to go, oh, that's really not that different from the stuff we did last semester with SQL. They're just formatted differently. All right. So as it says here, this view that we just added displays the number of items in the cart and the total cost. And if you click on it, there's a link that shows the details of the cart to the user. All right. So we have to make another change. We have to go into our layout file and we have to provide this. So we're going to go into our underscore layout.cs HTML file. Oops. Oh, I did that, but I did. And we're going to have to add this. All right. So it's near the beginning of our body here in our underscore layout.cs HTML file. Okay. Right after our title, it's right there. That's what I just added. Again, as shown on the bottom of page 235 in the textbook. All right. Let's try it out and see if it works. So it's time for another file, save all, and run the program. Notice you have 0 items, $0 up in the upper right-hand corner. So I'll throw in a soccer ball. I now have 1 item, all right, and that item is $19.50. The key takeaway, though, is when I continue shopping, that's still there. All right. Plus, we got this checkout, so if we want to go back there at any time, we can do that. Okay? Answer me this question if you would. Please look on the screen. All right? That allows us to go to the checkout. Okay, I think you all get that. Would it have been possible if we wanted to do this? Kind of important that you look at this. Instead of adding a button like this, could we have made this a hyperlink? And if you clicked on it, have you go to the checkout? I don't see why you couldn't have done that. And the reason I bring that up is it's not bad in here right now, but as you get to be adding more and more and more things here, you only have a certain amount of real estate. All right? My wife was reading this thing in the paper the other day that there's some land near where we live, and they're planning on putting 53 houses on it. I was like, wow, it looks like there's room for half that many. They'll wedge them in some way. All right. So we now just added this, which is our mini summary, if you'd call it that, and this, which allows us to check out. Okay? So as the author says here, with this addition, customers know what is in their cart, and they have an obvious way to check it from any place on the site. All right? The author used another HTML action method in order to be able to do this. All right? HTML.action. All right? So there's one thing basically left to do in this chapter. Okay? It's a little long-winded. Okay? So maybe we'll take a break first, but I want to explain first a couple things to you. All right? When we get done with this last part of the chapter, when we complete the last part here of the chapter, what you'll be able to do, if you look up, well, I guess I'll have to run it again because I want you to see this. All right. So if I run the program again, right now we can add whatever we want here. All right. But the point is, what do we do when we're done? I don't know if you agree with that, but right now we can add what we want to the cart. We can remove things from the cart, etc. It's also got smarts built into it. Notice I've got a kayak. If I go back to water sports and I click another kayak, notice it just made it 2. I didn't have 2 orders with 1 kayak each. I had 1 order with 2 kayaks. All right? So it has some smarts built in. The point is right now, okay, I'm done. I want to buy this. What the heck do I do? Right now, there's nothing I can do. All right? And we're going to fix that. But the thing to realize when we get done is you're going to be able to see your orders. All right? I'm going to recommend that you do this. If you look up on the screen, everybody would do this right now. And that is up on the screen here, up here on my desktop, there's my project, Sports Store. Okay? I can tell this wherever I want my emails to go. I'm going to add another folder right here. So I'm going to add another folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call it Orders. And that's going to hold my orders. That's what we're going to be adding in just a couple minutes. You don't have to do that. It would be totally permissible for you to do this. If you look up on the screen, I could decide that I wanted to put them right inside of my project folder. I think that's a very, very, very bad idea. First of all, what if you got hundreds of orders? All right. Second of all, what if you have to do a lot of manipulation with that file? It shouldn't be really in the same place. Really shouldn't be in the same place as the same folder as the project. And we're going to take a break, but before we do, I wanted to see, let's see. Was wondering if I still, there's mine. See what it says right here? I put it right on the C drive earlier, and it says Sports Store emails. All right. These are the orders that I sent as I was playing around with this. So if you look, I'm just going to bring up one of them so you can see it. This is what it's going to look like. And it looks pretty ugly. But you'd have to use JSON or something else to parse this stuff out. So you can see there's the date I made the order. Says that a new order was submitted. It's by default sending the orders here. That's basically going to be like the admin area of our website. All right, that's where the order is coming from. And this is what I ordered. When you start looking at it, what's in there? Well, there's some kind of a cap. There's a soccer ball, etc. All right, and it even has, when you look at it, the cost, who to ship to. There's me. There's Rankin's address. There's the city. There's the state. There's the zip code. there's the country, and we don't by default want there to be any gift wrapping. So we're going to go in and create all of that, starting on page 236. Like I said, I think it pretty much goes through most of the rest of the chapter. I'm going to very quickly just jump here and show you this on 241. This is what we're going to have when you want to check out. All right? And when you click complete order, that'll send that out for us. All right? So it is 125. Let's please come back at 140, and we'll attempt to finish this chapter.